Good morning, Ms. Weber.
Good morning.
It's nice to see you.
Thank you. Nice to see all of you. Good morning.
Please get comfortable, and when you are ready, you may begin with your opening statement.
Chairperson Roberts and members of the Commission, thank you for your service and dedication. My goal is to be the next Iowa Supreme Court Justice. Let me start by saying an Iowa Supreme Court Justice should possess, I think, several key attributes. One is intellectual ability, to research, to analyze, to be able to reach a reasoned decision on the most complex and difficult legal issues that come before our Iowa courts. Another is the ability to discuss legal issues in a collegial manner with colleagues, fellow justices, and with law clerks. Justices should be able to persuade others to their point of view, but should also keep an open mind. Third, I think, is writing ability. The decision must be written in a way that clearly conveys the reasoning and the result, not just for the parties in the case, but for others to understand and be able to apply that law as binding precedent throughout the state. A justice must, of course, be fair and impartial, deciding cases without bias. And lastly, I think our judges should be able to do community outreach as the justices do now with traveling around the state. I think that's important to show our public how our court system works in Iowa. Now, members of the commission, you know me. You know my qualifications. I've been here before in front of this commission. I obviously haven't closed the deal on why I'm the best candidate for the position. Frankly, part of why I didn't apply the last few times is I was discouraged and didn't know what I was doing wrong. But if you believe in yourself, pick yourself up, and you try again. And here I am. So let me talk to you about my qualifications. If you look at some of my main qualifications, I do have more to offer than other candidates. I have 20 years of legal experience. I went to a top law school, graduated in the top 10% of my class, clerked for several federal judges, held a senior counsel position in the United States government, a position that had a high level of responsibility. I represented state agencies at our state attorney general's office, and I have significant jury trial experience. Now, as you know, I grew up in small town Iowa in Centerville. I'm the oldest of 5 children. I understand the challenges facing rural Iowa, but I also know its rewards. After graduating from Centerville High School, I went to the University of Notre Dame. I felt called to public service. I majored in government international studies, and I did a concentration in the Hesburgh program in public service. After that, I completed a 4-year joint degree at Georgetown University in law, as well as a master's in public policy. Achieving high academic distinction among a class of peers at a well-regarded law school, I believe, demonstrates my intellectual ability. And strengthening my legal education were my other experiences in a criminal justice clinic, representing indigent defendants in the DC court system, mock trial, and my journal, the American Criminal Law Review. In the summer of 2000, I had a busy summer. I graduated from law school, moved back to Iowa, passed the bar exam, married my husband of now almost 20 years, and started my legal career. I'm now a proud working mother of 4 boys, ages 6 to 16. And one of my priorities is to support and mentor attorneys and staff that I work with. I try to let other parents know that they're not alone. I can relate to the challenges of balancing work and family life. Now, my judicial clerkship experience demonstrates my ability to research, to discuss and write. I clerked in federal district court for over 4 years here in the Southern District of Iowa. I understand what goes on at the busy trial court level. I also worked on appellate cases when my judges handled those cases. More than once, I noticed legal issues that, when applied properly, ultimately changed the direction, the outcome of a case. I found those times to be some of the most rewarding because I know that thoroughness and attention to detail make a difference. I also found that I enjoy the process. I enjoy the process of deciding cases, and as a clerk, I enjoyed reading the briefs from each side of a dispute, really researching and zeroing in on the issues to be decided in that case. I love the variety in the cases. I love talking about the cases. I'm actually somebody that thinks obscure issues of civil procedure are interesting. I love the satisfaction of the process, of going through that process, reaching a conclusion, and drafting it, and writing it up in a draft opinion for the judge. Now, the first judge I worked for, he used to joke that judges get affirmed, law clerks get reversed. With the last judge I clerked for, none of the cases I worked on for her during my 2 years with her were reversed. Now, I also worked as senior counsel for the United States Secret Service. And working as counsel to a federal agency is a unique experience that I would bring to the court. The role involved litigation support for the U.S. Department of Justice, also involved legislation and policy work such as amending federal law. I worked on high-profile cases, including litigation over records of visits to the White House complex and the Vice President's residence. And that was that litigation, those issues spanned some time during both the George W. Bush and the Obama administrations. Now, I believe that among the current applicants, I have one of the highest numbers of civil jury trials. Having a lot of civil jury trial experience, of course, is not necessary, but it is helpful to have been through it, to have been through it yourself when it's time to review a case on appeal. Many of my cases involve complex civil work. We are a bit understaffed at the Attorney General's office, and which is fine, but it means I have to take on a high level of responsibility. I need to exercise judgment. I need to often make decisions without supervision. And I currently represent the Department of Administrative Services, which is one of the most important agencies in our state because of its role in managing and coordinating the major resources of state government. And while I have not worked as a judge, this commission has shown through its previous choices that that is not a prerequisite. Of course, current justices, Wiggins, Apple, Waterman, Mansfield, and Oxley were not judges prior to joining the court. The work of an appellate judge is different than the work of a trial judge. And over my career, I have demonstrated the qualities, the characteristics needed to succeed as an appellate judge. To explain my views, I'll say this. On the court, I would demonstrate intellectual honesty. It is important to reach the result that the applicable law requires, even if you don't like the outcome. I believe in the rule of law and the Constitution. I am not here to advance a personal agenda. I only seek to do justice. If I come across as Iowa nice, it doesn't mean that I am not comfortable with asserting my positions, my views, and articulating my decisions. I would respect not just the power, but also the limits of the judiciary. I believe in the separation of powers for 3 branches of government. I believe that the role of the judicial branch is to interpret the law. The role of the executive branch is to execute the law, and the role of the legislature is to make law. Another limit of the judiciary is that aside from rare exceptions such as subject matter jurisdiction, the judges and justices should not raise arguments for the litigants. It confuses the separate roles of our system when judges become advocates for one side or the other. And another type of judicial restraint I believe in is that judges and justices should not decide issues unnecessarily. Decide only what needs to be decided for that case. Leave the rest for another day, another case. Judges should make the right decision according to the law, but should also treat attorneys and litigants with respect and dignity to show them that their case matters. One side will, of course, always disagree with the outcome, but the parties will remember how they were treated. It's important that the public have confidence in our judiciary. When we unfortunately have disunity and discord among our executive and legislative branches of government, it's all the more important that the judiciary be our unity, be our stability. in looking back over my materials to prepare for today, I found a letter that Chief Justice Mark Cady sent to applicants to the court in July of 2018 to thank us for applying, which I thought was a very thoughtful gesture. He wrote, "Public service has many rewards, but perhaps none more than those reserved for lawyers privileged to serve on our state's highest court." I believe he is correct. Throughout my career, I have chosen to do public service because I want to do interesting and challenging work in a way that contributes to the well-being of society, and I want to do that for Iowa. Serving on our Iowa Supreme Court is a true public service to the people of Iowa, and it would be an honor and a privilege. In short, I have the experience. I'm ready to go all in and commit myself to this job. I'm the right choice for the Iowa Supreme Court. Thank you.
Thank you. And so at this time, we will take the opportunity for the commission to ask some questions, and we'll start with Ms. Stanger.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Question number 12 and question number 9 on our application asks about significant legal matters or pro bono experiences that our applicants would share with us. I'd like you to share with the commission an example of a legal matter or a case, maybe those, maybe something else, that has impacted you and how that might shape your approach should you be honored to be selected for the court.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, that's a good question. I think the significant legal cases I've had, I think that trials have been some of the most significant. So one of the cases I listed was the first one, my trial I had in the Anderson case a few years ago. I think that, there's obviously all kinds of things that go on as part of the process, from start to finish, from motion practice through discovery all the way through the trial. And it impacted me to be able to go through all of that and to go through a very intense, multi-week jury trial, to be able to understand all the decisions that happen at that level, at that process. There's so much that goes into it that then could be raised on appeal, but you realize you're dealing with, the moment you're trying to make objections, your error preservation issues, for things that could come up on appeal. I think I learned so much about the many, many things just being in the trenches of what happens in a jury trial. And just coupled with the fact that there was a lot of attention paid to that, and you have to put aside concerns, any worries about that, and do your job. And so I think I learned that I can handle that. I can handle that pressure, that ability to do my best and rise to the occasion. And obviously, even if things don't go your way, it's a disappointment, but you move on, and there's another case, another day, and it's important to have those kinds of lessons too. So I think that would be a good example of where I had learned about myself and my capabilities.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Pearson?
No question.
Mr. Gray?
Thank you. Ms. Weber, first of all, thank you very much for reapplying. As a person who was also not selected, I know what you're going through. I often ask the question of applicants, is it more important for a judge to be smart or to be wise? And today you told us several things you thought for a district court judge would do that I think are more wise than smart, which is not decide issues unnecessarily, not interfere with the role of the parties, and to have a good demeanor. What would a wise appellate judge also do?
Good question, but I think that those same characteristics would apply for an appellate judge as well, not just a district judge, because there are times when appellate judges or clerks, in looking at the materials, the briefs in a case, may spot an issue that would be very interesting to delve into in the case. But the parties, if they have not briefed that issue, that's not the proper role of the appellate judge to completely insert a new issue into the case. So I think that same characteristic of being wise and restraint, exercising that restraint, applies to a district as well as an appellate judge. And I think that's true for many types of characteristics, I guess, as a district and appellate judge. So hopefully that answers your question. I think you had the first part of that was a little bit different topic.
Well, yes, I wanted to thank you again for applying, even though you weren't selected before. And I think history will show that many of the judges on our appellate courts have done the same thing.
Okay. Yeah, I think to answer your question, I think so the same things I mentioned as far as the appropriate characteristics to be wise would apply to an appellate judge.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Hoyting.
You've had several experiences or a few experiences clerking for judges, which is I think a really unique experience. What did you tell the commission you took away that you learned from the judges you worked with, or what are some of the traits that you would emulate as a Supreme Court justice?
I had some notes I prepared on that because it's a question I hope to be able to talk about. And I wanted to make sure that I remembered everything because it's hard in the moment to kind of distill those lessons down to a few things. But I would say I learned from all of the judges I clerked for. They were mentors to me, excellent mentors. My first judge I worked for, Judge Viator, was a wonderful mentor. I learned so much from him. He was constantly training his clerks. He believed in tradition and ceremony, formality. He taught me the importance of following the local rules, following the federal rules. So he was a real stickler for rules, but that's good. And most importantly, I learned from him, he had a wonderful judicial temperament. I mean, he treated everyone that came before him with respect and dignity, some of those qualities that I would hope to emulate if I were to become a justice. He went out of his way to explain proceedings to people. For example, in criminal defendants, when they plead guilty, he went out of his way to make sure that they understood what they were giving up by pleading guilty. And he was a wonderful person to see in a naturalization ceremony for new U.S. citizens because he really enjoyed that, and he explained to them that they had the freedom to believe what they wanted to believe, which was wonderful. Judge Longstaff I did not clerk for quite as long as Judge Viator, not as closely, but he, underneath sometimes, a gruff exterior, he had a wonderful heart and was he's an amazing person too. In sentencing, for example, he really took the time to reach a sentence for that person that was considered for the individual and the circumstances, which is important to do. Judge Rose has great intellect, like all the judges that I clerk for, but what I would say about Judge Rose is I was impressed by her ability to, as a new judge coming onto the bench, to just be able to quickly get up to speed in areas of the law that she hadn't worked on, civil law, for example, a keen ability to quickly understand the legal issues in all areas and the intricacies of some of the civil cases, which is important for a judge to be able to do because no really judge is going to have experience or the same depth and breadth of experience in all areas. So I learned from all of them, and I hope to emulate the best qualities that I learned from each of them. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. O'Brien?
No questions.
Mr. Hobach?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just going to make kind of a statement about the disheartened about the not being selected. I want to tell you, Iowa was well known for its girls basketball, especially if you're from rural Iowa. And my granddaughter their team went to state and they lost. And she was disheartened because they lost. And I reminded her of the opportunity that she had that so many girls her age around the state wanted. And I just wanted to remind you, we're Iowa, 3.3 million population, so that means that 0.0000445% of Iowans get the opportunity to sit in that chair. And so I think that your effort to get to where you are now is something that you should cherish, and I know we do too. So thank you for reapplying.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Hobach. Mr. Spies?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I know you've probably scrutinized some of the briefs I've written for Judge Rose, and I was going to comment about the difference in advocacy between state and federal courts, but instead you commented about how the court shouldn't raise arguments for the litigants, and I understand that concept. Nonetheless, I know Judge Rose, Judge Longstaff, and I'm sure the many judges with which you're familiar have issued rulings that have enormous social consequence. And in the 30 seconds you have left, can you tell how to balance the rule of law versus the social consequence of rulings?
Sure, and I will say also that if you see an issue, if judge sees an issue that should, have been in a case or is very important to the outcome of a case, a judge could always ask for supplemental briefing, so that to make sure that that is fully briefed and addressed by the parties, and that would be the appropriate way to raise that. There's always going to be cases that have important social consequences, and I think you recognize that, but you make the decision that the law requires, as I mentioned. The applicable law requires without regard to the consequences or the outcome. Can't make a decision so that you're just outcome driven in your result, but you recognize and take the time to get the right decision according to the law. And so that's the way I would say to approach that.
Thank you.
Thank you. I am very disappointed that our time is gone for today, but we want to thank you very much for being here again with us and sharing, and we wish you well.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.